You are now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation. Coming up today.
This painting was painted with the P of every black male in Brooklyn. There's people just like, oh my God, that's amazing. How did he collect all that?
This is Radio Juxtapoz.
There's no shortage of art on social media. Over the last year, I think a lot of us have spent more time than we'd care to admit trying to scroll through it all. I remember being lost in one of those cycles on Instagram, endlessly flicking my screen as if I was trying to complete a game, and then out of nowhere, this crushed velvet do-rag and this wide mouth full of perfectly imperfect teeth hit my screen, and bang! Immediately I wanted to know more. These perfectly rendered do-rags, gold teeth, wide noses, big lips sat afloat a sea of chaos. In equal parts, the paintings of Khari Turner are a celebration as much as they are an exploration of black identity. Thanks for joining us here on Radio Juxtapoz, as Evan Preco and myself, Doug Gillen, take a deep dive into the world of Khari Turner, and we try to see what treasure we can find. We kick things off today by finding out Khari's views on non-alcoholic beer.
Are you still doing the non-alcoholic beer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Why?
Over 2 months.
Exactly.
Over 2 months.
What?
I understand drinking non-alcoholic. I mean, I understand going to doing no alcohol, but to drink non-alcoholic beer seems sad.
I think it's because it tricks my body into thinking I'm getting a treat.
That makes sense. You know, placebo.
Yeah, it's like who's been a good boy?
You deserve this.
You
one.
deserve this.
Okay, yeah, no, I get you. Wait, I think this is actually a really, really good place to start because you are from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Which is in the American psyche is a beer town.
Yeah.
And we're talking about non-alcoholic beer. I feel like if you were to show up in Milwaukee with like non-alcoholic beer, it would not go down well.
No, not at all. We have my favorite fact about Milwaukee is we have more breweries than grocery stores. More bars, breweries than grocery stores.
Wow. Okay.
Wait, so I was there a couple years ago. My dad and I went to a Milwaukee Brewers game. But I wanted to talk about Milwaukee because the museum there is beautiful.
Oh yeah, really, really nice.
Like, and it feels like it has sort of an artsy. There is an art scene in Milwaukee. Can you talk a little bit about like what's going on in Milwaukee right now?
It's not too much that I know about. It's like it's sprawling because there's a conversation between the regular art scene of like what's happening on basically the west side of Milwaukee, close to the lakefront, where everything is. The third ward is they have their own institute there, but then all the inner city Milwaukee art scene is non-existent. So it's like it's different. It's like coming up a lot as far as like what's happening. There's a couple galleries now that are really starting to make waves, but as far as like everything that's going on, I haven't been able to even get into all of the art scene that's starting to happen in Milwaukee now.
Would that have been because for the most part Chicago was the dominant art area of that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
well, that, and also like the people who contribute to the arts are usually not contributing in Milwaukee. Like the funding from the arts coming from the community isn't really there as much as it would be in like places like Chicago or New York. The Midwest just doesn't have as much funding as it potentially could be, because there's a lot of talent in Milwaukee, but it's one of those things where the way to expose your talent is to get out of Milwaukee. And just tell people like, oh, this is where I'm from. But you're like, oh, so many talented people in Milwaukee. Yeah, they're not living there though.
What does Milwaukee art look like?
Oh my goodness. It's really hard because the thing about it is the funding that goes to the Milwaukee art is usually always kind of like the big graphic design style murals and regular, like doing the Milwaukee in bold letters with like symbols of the museum and like skyline. So it depends. Because there's so many other people who are doing work, but again, they're like a lot of people in the inner city that are, making their own creations and doing, graffiti art and all types of other stuff. Like a lot of my art at the beginning was graffiti art because that was kind of everywhere. Although the Milwaukee Museum makes it so it's like you get the opportunity to see all this great stuff. But again, that's by the lakefront. So it's like where really all of the businesses are, all of the more wealthy areas are. And so to get out there, you really have to like make your way that way. So it kind of just depends.
Wait, when you say that it looked like graffiti, were you actually going out and doing graffiti?
No. So so yes and no. So I was terrified of I was. That's what it was. I was terrified of going out and like somebody stopping me as I'm like painting the wall and I got like a backpack full of supplies. So I was like, man. So what I would do is just find like random loose boards of wood that nobody cared about, and then I would spray paint those because I was like, nobody's gonna stop me for this. So that's what I did. But yeah, I was like, I could never do it on a building because everywhere in Milwaukee is like so open, and depending on where the area is, like police usually go through the areas that are like places where there's abandoned buildings and the places you would want to spray paint. So.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Milwaukee graffiti scene. Was it pretty active when you were younger? I guess you're still young because you're only 30, right? So you're still young, but yeah.
Well, no, not as far as I know. I remember seeing graffiti, but it was never anything where it was like intricate, really nice, people trying to figure out their style. It was more like gang markers. Like, don't come this way. So it wasn't like active. All the other art that I was looking at was usually always online.
What was your entry point into art then? Was it through these graffiti type spray painted wooden panels, or was it something else?
No, my grandfather was a draftsman for this punk company, so he was drawing all the time. And even his younger years, he drew all the time. And he had like a wood shop in his basement. And I basically spent a lot of time with my grandparents. I pretty much grew up with them for a long time. And so he had all this wood shop downstairs. He did all these drawings. So my grandparents had art all over the place. They would go to like, Milwaukee has a lot of festivals. And one of them is called like Afro Festival or African Festival. And so they would have like, people would come out there like vendors with prints of random artwork that they had or that they would probably steal from somewhere else and print it up and just sell. So like they had all these pictures all over the house. And so I kind of grew up seeing art everywhere in one way or another. They would have, African statues or I guess considered African statues. I don't know if they would really come from Africans, but they were just statues all over the place and little trinkets. You know how back in the day they used to collect little darlings, like people used to have those little darling statues. Yeah. So like they had stuff like that, except for the black version. So, so it was art all over the place. And so what I ended up doing is my grandfather, I knew he could draw, so he would draw stuff for me, and then I would basically try to copy it. And like so I had like posters of planes. He would draw a plane, I would draw a plane. And then after a while, I would basically was in school and people in school would draw. And so I was like, I got to learn how to do that. Really schooling my grandfather at a young age and all the art that was kind of surrounding me in my own house or my grandparents' house.
Was your grandfather like tuned in to maybe what was happening in art, or did he just do what he liked and that was just kind of, or do what his profession was, but also the stuff that or like, did he have books around or anything like that? Or is it just mostly what he liked?
He grew up in New York, so he had like a site art, like he understood that space. And he went to school for art, but at the time when he was growing up, obviously he wasn't thinking about being an artist. He was like, okay, I need to make money for my family. What can I do? And so he worked at this pump company and he, created designs or drew up the designs for that. So like, that's all he did. As far as like the art scene in any other way, he was really just like, this is what I like to draw. And so he just drew that. So it was a lot of realistic portraiture and all types of other realistic renderings of, people and stuff.
When did you realize that this was kind of the path that you were going to be following?
Oh, really early. I knew art was gonna be my whole setup. I just didn't know what kind of art or what way to make art work. So like at first I was like, maybe I can be a courtroom sketch artist or a police sketch artist. Like maybe I can work for Pixar. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but like making like actual paintings and whatnot and making it work off that was definitely not a reality. It didn't seem real because I didn't see anybody else doing it. And I was like, there's no jobs for that. So, so before a while, it was just like, I'm going to make it art related, but I knew I was going to do something with art regardless. It was either going to be this or a chef.
Well, that's interesting. Awesome. Well, it's interesting because your grandfather went to art school and then found a trade for his talent, which I think was probably the case for a lot of people back in the day.
Yeah.
Because like nobody was like coming out of art school in the 30s, 40s, and 50s whenever your grandfather was coming out and was like, I'm going to be a studio painter in New York. There wasn't really, it just wasn't the same. So even that the fact that you're like looking at using it as a trade was probably like more of an old school way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, and also like it's just Milwaukee. Like I knew that we had museums, but the museums didn't have people from Milwaukee in them. They had, people from all over the other places. And so even in school, like there was never a point where the teacher would tell you, and I had great art teachers, but they were never like, all right, so how to make it as an artist is this way. And you do this, this, and this. It was just like, do you want to know how to make work? Like, this is how we do it. And that's it.
Right. Yeah. One of the accidental influences of Juxtapoz over the last 27 years is that we've made the artistic life very, very like accessible to people. So then younger kids were like, I could be an artist and have studio shows. And it's like, it's a great influence that we've had, but also like I'm sure there's some art teachers like Juxtapoz has made it seem like everybody's just gonna have their own studio and solo shows every year. Art Forum made it seem like nobody could be part of this. Art Forum's like no one can be part of this.
Right.
But then like as we've grown, as more and more as the web internet too, it's like art is more accessible and people can like have entry points now that weren't existent before.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have like a sort of a creative network when you were going through school? Were your friends and peers, were they sort of like involved or interested in the arts, or did you find yourself a little bit more out on your own?
Oh, I definitely was out on my own. It was so when I went straight from Milwaukee to Tennessee, and I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Tennessee in a school in the middle of nowhere called Austin Peay. And then right after that, literally as soon as I started that when I was 24. So in 2015. So I went to school later. I went to the real nice, expensive art school in Milwaukee. That just didn't go well. It just didn't go well. Anyway, so
no, I think there's a story there.
There's a lot that happened between the year I graduated in 2009 to 2015. I worked for the NBA. I was a cheerleader. I did all types of. Yeah, I was a cheerleader for a long time. So anyway, I basically went to that fancy art school in 2010, in the spring of 2010, and I had everything going for me. I had some scholarships and stuff because I had worked right after high school to get some scholarships, and then I had financial aid, and everything was all set up to go. However, my mom had to do something for my financial aid. I was, 18, about to be 19 years old. They always have to sign up for your financial aid, which is a scam in a bunch of ways. Because if your parents mess up on your financial aid, then you don't get it. And so basically my mom had some stuff that she had to put in, and it just didn't get through. And so I ended up owing the school all the financial aid that I didn't pay because I couldn't get that money. So I had to drop out and then go and get a job and start paying that off immediately. Because it was like $6,000. And I was like, I don't have a spare $6,000 to just give the school to start the next semester. So I got out, and then basically for the next couple years, I was taking time to pay that off. And it took forever because I didn't have job experience before. So then I got a job at this random sporting goods store. And man, and then I did warehouse jobs, and warehouse jobs were the worst thing possible because they make you realize how much you want to do art. So then when I moved to Tennessee, I was like, oh, I'm making this work. There's nobody can stop me. I'm not doing anything else because I will rather die than go back to working in a warehouse. As soon as I moved to Tennessee, I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to figure this thing out. And I got to Columbia. And as soon as I got here, I was like, all right, now I'm in New York City. Time to really figure out this thing.
What drew you to Tennessee? Because that's a big change from Milwaukee to go to Tennessee.
Yeah, cheerleading. Yeah. So I've been cheerleading since like 2008. And my boy was on the Austin Peay State University cheer team. Really great team. And so he was like, hey, come down. We got possible scholarship opportunities. And I went down for like a week and was like, okay, I'm coming. And I was like, I have no children, so I can do what I want. And so then I left. If y'all can give me a scholarship and y'all can give me a place to stay, I'll come down. And they were like, yeah, we got it. And so, boom, I go down to Tennessee, and then I do four straight years. And I was a school mascot, and I was a cheerleader the whole time. And
you were doing art.
Oh yeah. As soon as I got into that school, I was like, okay, I got to take over some type of way. And so I basically I went into that school, just trying to get as many opportunities as I possibly could.
So your mom messing up your financial aid ended up being the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah, pretty much.
It took a while to get there, but it worked out.
You know, I'm a strong believer in things happen for a reason. So, like, I think that me going through that potential in life and seeing the other side of me not making it doing this really pushes me now to be the best and hardest working I can right now. Because once I went through that and had like all those years of me trying to struggle to get some money, and honestly, $725 is terrible. And when you start needing a car and start needing insurance and having to pay the school back, it took me forever to pay them back just at $6,000 because I was paying for everything else. And I was working part-time, so it was like 20 hours a week. So yeah, it was rough. And then I got into a car accident and didn't have insurance, had to pay that off. Man, it was rough for a minute. But because of all of that, I'm like here now doing exactly what I want to do, because I saw that side and I was like, nah.
You moved to New York. You're like, I don't need a car.
Yeah,
I don't have. I got that out of the way.
As soon as I got here, I was like, okay, I know that I got this school and this studio for 2 years. I can ride this wave on financial aid and potential opportunities I can get outside of this. If I can make that work to make something out of myself, so when I get out of here, I can actually pay all this stuff off, then I'll be good. So shoot, as soon as I started here, I pretty much started talking to people. I started doing all this stuff, and then the pandemic happened. And then somehow it got better for me. I don't know how, but it got so much better.
So during this time, your art is changing and developing, just quietly in the background, or are you still doing shows, or what's happening?
No, it was really quietly in the background. So when I got to here, I pretty much had nothing other than the people who knew me in Clarksville and then some of my family who knew me in Milwaukee. And I had like a slight goal to, meet people and get out there. But essentially, I only really started to change within these past year and a half. And so it was really just me being in a spot where I knew I had nothing to lose and just started dumping as much into everything as I could. When I first got here, I had maybe 200 followers on my art account. I got 30,000 now, but the only reason that happened is it was a slow just burn. I don't know exactly what, but one person saw me, and then maybe a couple other bigger accounts saw me, shared my work, and then just more and more people came with as much as everything was happening. And as soon as the pandemic happened and everybody was looking more towards social media, then it really helped me out, because there's already artists doing shows and I wasn't doing any shows. So how do I get the attention? Well, all the shows are canceled. People are looking for art online. I'm online making paintings every day or every other day. They're like, oh, I like what he's doing. And so it just boosted everything. And then it kind of exactly at the same time of George Floyd's murder, because of that and the outlook, already my work had this kind of conversation around Black identity and social justice. So it was people were then shown my work during that time, and then multiple people, and then also the Black Thought album cover I did really boosted that up. immediately. So yeah, just like little things that I just kept chipping away at is really how it happened. It was all kind of in the background, and then it slowly started coming to light until kind of where I'm at right now.
Do you consider your work protest art?
No, I feel like my work is more inspirational. I started off doing protest art when I was in Tennessee, but after doing all that art, I realized that the outcome of what the art was doing was not exactly what I wanted it to be. So like I did a whole series on protest, specifically in my senior show, and after the show, like people liked it, but then I also got people who would come in, and even though I had like straight physical evidence of injustices that happen to people, black people, and instances with police officers, people would still kind of come to a point where they're like, well, what about the other side? Or, well, this isn't all the way the truth, or this is bias. Like, how are you going to show this if this? And I realized, I was like, I'm not really making this art because I want to. I'm thinking like, oh, this art is going to be informative. It's not informative to people who already chose what side that they wanted to be on. And so I was like, well, what am I really making art for? And I was like, if I'm not making it for me, then what am I really making it for? So then what I did was I stopped doing that work. I started working or trying to work at Rikers doing like classes before the pandemic. Then the pandemic happened. I couldn't do the classes, but we did exhibition of people who were formerly or on death row and did a show with them. So like lately I've been trying to just change all of that work into physical work with people who are incarcerated, and then just making my art kind of what I want it to be.
Did you get to sort of develop those relationships when you were doing this? When you were working with people that are incarcerated or on death row, was there kind of like a lot of communication between you and these subjects, or was it a little bit more disconnected than that?
Yeah, it was a little bit more disconnected, only because it was actually supposed to be a physical show, but then obviously the pandemic happened, and so it became a digital show. But I was also working with the Justice Department here at the school at Columbia. Like when I first got here, I knew I wanted to do that. So I definitely, connected with people here at the Justice Department, and then they're the ones who set me up with trying to get in to do art classes with people at Rikers. But because of that, they knew I had a strong arts background. And usually the people who are doing that aren't really artists or anything like that. They're just, people who want to volunteer and maybe have done like art projects before. So it's not like, so I had like just a different perspective. But yeah, we never got to really get in touch with people. All the people that I wanted to get in touch with, it got real difficult.
I'd imagine almost every single person listening to this has been involved in some hard conversations over the last few years. Disagreeing with people you love or complete strangers in heated discussions seems to have become part and parcel of our daily lives in both the physical and digital world. Trying to convince someone to change their mind by yelling at them or telling them they're wrong just doesn't work. In fact, it almost feels like it'll make them dig their heels in even further. Khari's work doesn't stand and scream at you about injustice. Rather, he invites you to participate in the conversation yourself, to explore the history and the meaning behind each work through not only the features of the faces he paints, but the materials he uses to paint them with.
Water is a big part of what you're doing right now. When did that kind of start? Was that stuff that you were starting to work with in Tennessee, or is that something that's been over the last year and a half?
Pretty much over the last year and a half. Okay. This idea of the noses and the lips that I've been doing, that started in Tennessee. And that started because of this idea of social justice. So when I first started doing all my research for my senior show, I was like, all right, I know that privatized prisons and like the funding to put bodies into these prisons is like a really big issue, because it creates a situation where we need people in the prison. Okay, well then now we're gonna start getting people in the prisons. Well, how do you do that? Well, you find petty crimes, the three strikes, all of these long sentences for stuff that's like super not something that people should be going to jail for, and then you fill up those prisons. Well, and you make money off of that. But it becomes a question of like, how do you change something like that? So either way, when I was making all that, when I was doing all that research, I found that people with wider noses, thicker lips, and darker skin got longer prison sentences on death row, which, obviously makes sense. Like the percentage of black bodies in prison connected to the percentage of black bodies in the United States is drastically different. It was one thing to think about, like, just my nose and my lips and my skin could be the reason I get a longer sentence. So then I started, just focusing on that, which eventually now it changed into like these aspects of inspiration for the work, and like thinking about these as like markers of my ethnic identity, understanding that there's a whole history behind it. But that's where the water came from. So like I started thinking about, relationships to segregated pools, the connection to my identity in water. Consider growing up next to Lake Michigan, I was always by water. And to think that there was so many people who would be by water and that could not swim. Like my grandmother couldn't swim, so she made it a very big part that her grandchildren could swim. And so like my mom really can't swim either, but like she can get around. She's in the pool, she's not drowning, but she's not swimming. So
wait, this is interesting because I forget that when you, Doug, I don't know if you've ever seen Lake Michigan before, but it looks like the fucking ocean. It's so big. Because I grew up on the Pacific Ocean, so I could see the ocean and like the concept of it. But looking at Lake Michigan, it's a weird feeling of, so like, I don't know if this works, but like, do you feel a difference between being on a lake and then being like next to the ocean?
No, not at all.
Because Lake Michigan's so big.
Yeah, because and like my favorite part of Lake Michigan is like this like park that's off onto the side, like off the east coast, and it's like a cold lakefront with like properties that curve the whole thing. And so basically you see the properties, you see the curve, and then after the curve you see nothing else. And those are all lakefront properties, so they they just got their beach going up to the water, so you don't see anything but sand and then just water. And you don't even see the houses because there's trees the whole way. So like that's my favorite place. That's where I get like a lot of my Lake Michigan water from. And it's just like, it's so nice. It's just really, really nice. And so when I first saw the beach, I was like, this is pretty close. I didn't know. When I was on the Pacific, I was like, I did not know it was just like this. But yeah.
So how does the water then interact with your work?
It's interesting. So at first, last year in July, I did like this residency at Iris Project, which is next to Venice Beach. And that's where it started this whole thing. Like water was already in the work, but like ocean water wasn't in the work until I actually went to the ocean. And so when I saw it, I was like, okay, contextually, this makes sense. Like I'm talking about all these things about, Black identity and connections to the ocean, like add ocean water to the work. But one thing that I didn't think of was like the interaction between the paint and the actual substance of the water. Because of the salt, because of the minerals, because of everything, the paint actually collected to those particles that were in the water, and then like transformed the way that the paint and the actual water separated. And so like the paint drying and the paint mixing like created a different surface than I was really working with. So that's what made me go, okay, I can definitely do something with this. Well, let me make the water a little bit more specific and think about like, okay, what water am I using? What kind of historical context can I add to the water? Like, what am I doing? And so that's when I started using the water here in Manhattan, thinking about like the ports that slave ships would come through, and like, okay, if I'm using the water that these ports were that are the same water that slave ships came through, like there's added context more and more to each thing that I'm doing in the work.
That's mad. I like this. I like these layers. These layers are crazy. And then the features are oil.
Yeah. So I was, again, when I was younger, I thought, rendering was the go-to. In school, they're always like, all right, this is how you make a box. You make a box look like a box. So I thought that rendering was the end-all be-all. Like if I can make something look like something, oh, then you got it. That's it. There's no more art after that.
You completed it.
Yeah, I was like,
game over.
Art school, I get an A. I'm done.
That's what I thought. I was like, okay, as soon as I can do this, then I can paint anything. And then I got to that point, and I was like, man, I need something else. Like I need a whole bunch of something else, because I got to a point where I was like making work that looked like the person, that had all these different things. And I was like, this isn't doing it. And then I did all the work where I would paint scenes of protests. And I was like, okay, this is it. And I was like, this is still not it. And so the abstraction came in because I was like, there needs to be a disconnect between the person, specifically who it is, and like the viewer. Because I kept running into problems where I would want to have a conversation around topics, but people would be so more interested in who the painting was of, and my connection to that person. And I was like, I don't care about that part of the conversation. So people, like, oh, is this a friend? Or like, is this a cousin? I was like, it don't matter who he is or this person is. this is about what's happening in the scene. And I was like, But yeah, so like I like pretty much just changed all of that when I changed that.
So in a sense, like when you went more abstract, you were actually able to communicate a clearer message.
Yeah. It needed to happen that way, because it was like I kept getting stuck. And the thing about it is like being in Tennessee, I had a lot of white classmates who did not feel comfortable talking about any type of issues, especially considering all the stuff that was happening with Freddie Gray and everybody in these conversations, Pharrell Castile, and all these people. So it was like what they would try to link to would be something completely opposite of what I was having a conversation around. And so I was like, that's not what I want. And I try and just straight abstraction wasn't going to cut it. But if I can figure out a way to combine the two to allow for an entry into the work in multiple different ways, finally get to certain different points, then that's the way I wanted to do it. And yeah, so oil paint was just the way I was taught, and or at least the way that I learned. Nobody taught me, but the way that I was like, I really like painting in this medium. So like oil paint was like the go-to for every time. Plus it gives like a lusciousness to the skin tones that I'm working on, and like treats the figure a lot more like carefully. So I feel like when I do these parts of black bodies, it's in diligence to make sure that they are rendered well and also like carefully.
Did it feel unnatural taking away eyes?
No, not at all.
It's funny because our guest on last week's podcast, his entire reputation was built off of his eyes. Not his eyes, but he paints, the eyes are like the focal point of his work. And this week we've got you who's like, fuck the eyes. I just want nose and mouth.
Yeah, no, it's actually great because people are like, eyes are the windows to the soul, which is great. However,
if eyes are the window to the soul, what are the nose and the mouth?
The airways. The thing about it is that you can see the water in my work. And what I figured out, or at least what I really thought about for a long time, is like my artwork is made of bodies of water, of people who are made of bodies of water, trying to communicate to actual humans who are made of about 70 to 80% of water. So we all are bodies of water. So it's a different connection. It's like this body of water next to my body of water, and how does the water between the both of us become a conversation? And so that's when everything changes, because I'm thinking about people as the ocean, but I'm also thinking about the connection between me to any other person outside of skin tone, which is funny because it's like a lot about skin tone, but like that's the second entry into the counter entry into the work. Like some people enter the work through the facial features, but then other people enter the work through the abstraction. And I wanted it to be that way because I don't want it to be any type of situation where there's a barrier between any person that's an audience member or who's viewing the piece. And so like you can either go, I really like that abstraction, and then go, oh, I really like the way that these facial features or hands are rendered. Or you can go, I really like the way that these facial features are rendered. Oh, and this abstraction with them is interesting. So it's a two-way street that I was like really focused on making possible through different avenues. So it's no eyes to the body at all, but the connection between this body of water and your body as full of water is supposed to be the new connection.
Well, this is interesting because that's such a good explanation. It's so cool because you can look at your work without any sort of explanation of the materials, and it's stunning, beautiful work. So you've got that. And then like if somebody wants to just do a tiny bit more of a read up of what you're doing, like there's another history that you're playing with. Like it's fascinating because you were saying that you had some, I don't want to say misinterpretations, but in Tennessee there was some sort of people's putting their own personal expectations on the work that weren't actually there. Was that a turning point where you were like, I can do two things here. I can do the visual that's stunning, but also I want the story to be like, you feel like you've done such a great job of balancing it. Like, did it take you a while to be able to like explain how you were going to approach this? When did you get comfortable with like, I can do both at the same time?
I think probably like last year, right around when the pandemic happened. Because at first I was doing like these little portraits and I wanted to fill my studio with all types of stuff because I was like, okay, as soon as I can get some work in here, I can start, networking and bringing people in. They were basically what I do now, but they were more like just painterly abstractions. There was no water. It was all paint because I was trying to get more comfortable just painting abstractly and loosely. My drawings I've always been drawing. So like drawings were easy to do. And so that's also why like a lot of these feature like drawing marks, because I was like practicing. So like the whole first semester being here, I pretty much was in the studio every single day from like 8 a.m. to like 12 p.m. for me, just like pounding it out. Cause I was like, I gotta figure this thing out. Cause I knew it was in my head, but I was like, how do I pull this? So I kept making different pieces and going like, okay, this is close. So I did like a series of like 15 within a span of like 2 months of just like testing out different ways this work could look. Right when the pandemic started and I was like leaning less towards oil paint because I was indoors, then I started leaning more towards acrylics and inks and all these different things. And because of that, water really started kind of coming in even more. Like it was slightly in my studio, but then when the pandemic hit, I started really thinking about these aspects of spirituality around my connection to, my history. Like, what do I know past the water? Like nothing. So like how much more of history in the water should be connected to, me as a person. Right when that happened, I was like, I could make this work. This is starting to look good. And I was doing like a couple pieces in my apartment after, because the first like 2 weeks of that dread of like everything shutting down, where everybody was like, we're indoors, you can't go outside.
It's over. Nothing ever again.
Yeah, this exactly. Is it. The end.
It was like, that first 2 weeks of like, all right, we're closing everything. Like, wait, what? Because it was so quick. It was like, it's not that bad. Okay, it might be a little bad. Shut down. Like, what? And the school kicked us out. But yeah, so like after that first like initial 2 weeks, I was like, okay, well, I'm done with, soaking for this or, being in this space. I was like, I got to work because this is the answer to everything. Like I was in a place where I was like, I need to be making things. If I don't make anything, what's the point of these next 2 years? So either way, when I started working, I was like, this is it. And then, when I finally went to California is when everything started just clicking. And then after that first initial contact with ocean water in the painting, and seeing that transformation, I was like, oh, this opened this whole thing up. Because at first I was scared that I was going to get to a point where I would get to a wall and I couldn't make this work as exciting as I wanted to because it was so limiting as far as like abstraction, facial features. The adding of like specific waters and like context and like history was really the stepping stone in making it going like, okay, I can do this forever now.
Now, this is the most unfair question.
Go ahead.
But do you remember when you were like, oh shit, this works? Like, did you take a step back from the work and go like, and like, okay, you remember that? Yeah.
It was 2 moments. So the first was during quarantine, I have this piece. It's like a really big, like 48 by like a 60-inch piece on paper. I was doing a bunch of pieces on paper when quarantine happened because I couldn't get supplies. So I did this piece on paper, and people connected it to like a coronavirus head because it has like these multiple branches coming out of it with these puffs at the end. But it was just like a reference picture that I was using of like this African hairstyle, and so it was like really dope for me. And I finished it, and I was standing in front of it, and I was like, oh yeah. This is it. I can make this work for forever. Or I was like, this is what I want. And then the second one is this piece called Meeting of Two Oceans that I did, right in Venice. And it had this like, it was one section of ocean water and then another section of ocean water with different pigments in it that met kind of in the middle, but like did not mix. And I thought about immediately, I was like, because the idea was like, if I was to go to the ocean and try to meet an ancestor at the ocean, would I bring flowers? And then so I painted like, or drew in flowers to this piece. And so I was like, oh yes, this is the piece. This is the one. I was like, I was like, oh, this is great. This is fantastic. And so I was like, okay, how do I go even better than this? And so, yeah.
Where did that turn of phrase that if I've met my ancestors at the edge of the ocean, would I bring flowers? Is that from something, or is this just pure you?
It's just pure me.
That's. I mean, it was really good.
I assumed it was like you.
That is like the best thing I've ever. Seriously, that was
a lot of my time before going back to school was looking at like slam poetry. I have a lot of friends who are slam poets, so like, and I have like a bone for poetry. A lot of my titles are Langston Hughes poem references, and so like, there's a lot of me. You know, I was a kid who sat next to the water. Like, just thoughts came. And so, like, things like that just made sense. Like, to think of it in a way where it's, like, fantastical, but, like, realistic, but, like, you know, mixing. Kind of in the same way that I paint. Like, there's parts of it that are realistic, and then parts of it that are just kind of, like, abstract ideas that potentially could happen. So, yeah, it was, like, me thinking of, you know, that. And it's not always at the beginning of the thought. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of a painting and then have this thought, because like I started with the just like figure and I was like, oh, this is interesting, and then I put in these flowers and then I was like, and then I saw the way that the paint kind of met and did not like mix, and I was like, this feels like the edge of like two oceans meeting. And if you ever see like pictures of two oceans meeting, like they mix in the bottom, but like there's clear sign like they like hit each other. So I was like, if I was in that position and I was an ocean, like my body is a body of water, meeting an ocean of a body of water, and like memory is in water. So like to think of like an ancestor in that water, like in us meeting, what would that be like?
It's amazing. I'd like to say, you know, you sort of found some inspiration in California. Somebody who lives in California. It feels pretty good. What that residency was kind of a breakthrough, and you did it in the middle of the pandemic. What was this residency in Venice Beach?
Yeah, it's called Iris Project. I'm actually having a show there this month.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going back. The 15th. It's called Iris Project. It's right next to Venice. It basically had like a small studio and like a small 1-bedroom apartment. And we had set this up like 2019 November, not having no idea what was gonna happen. Right. And so it was pretty much touch and go until July when I had went, because it was like, this is really bad, to like, okay, we're maybe letting some things open. And July was right when they started letting a little of the bars like open, or like outdoor seating started to happen. And so we were like, okay, as long as I get on a plane and get there, I can still quarantine at the residency once I actually am in the residency, because it's just one bedroom apartment or one studio apartment, and then just the studio. So like I didn't have much contact with anybody outside of that. So it was like, yeah, as soon as I went, I went to the beach early in the morning when nobody would be around, and just to like see and hear the water without the sounds of everything else. And yeah, it was transformative.
You're listening to Radio Juxtapoz in conversation with Khari Turner. We'll be sure to put all the details of Khari's exhibition, The Sea's Own Children, Iris Project in Venice, California, in the description of this episode, so you can check it out for yourself. Stay with us now as we get deeper into Khari's background as a cheerleader for the NBA and more, right now on Radio Juxtapoz. Not that it's weird, but if you put anything...
Let's get weird, it's okay.
What's the weirdest thing you've experimented with in your paintings?
There we go.
Oh, I don't think there's anything that's weird in there, at least not yet. I have like a future plan to do like a watermelon juice and a series of like southern watermelons. Yeah, thinking about like, because if I'm thinking about material, because I also do sculpture. That's a real reason why a lot of this is happening, because my mind is thinking about material, because material is such a big part of sculpture. So then I just bring that into my paintings. And so like I'm thinking about potentially like using watermelon in the future because of, but specifically from like certain areas in the South, just because of like that connection between history. But like wine has entered the work. I don't think anything else has entered the work that I can think of.
Okay.
Like I haven't like Andy Warhol peed on any of my pieces.
That's what I was looking for, man. I was just looking for it. I took a shit on the last one.
No,
That's gonna
Semen
the
in my
manic.
painting.
that's gonna be in your manic 40s.
For all of a sudden,
Oh my
you're
God! I need all the paint from
42,
every
I'm
black
peeing on
male
paint.
in New York. The weird part is who's buying that painting? Like, is that going to the Brooklyn Museum? Like, oh, this painting was painted with the pee of every black male in Brooklyn. So there's people who's just like, oh my God, that's amazing. How did he collect all that?
I think that would be the main thing. People would be like, how did you
collect
extract that?
Like even the homeless ones? Yes, all of
That brings up a good point, though. When do you think experimentation can go a little too far?
I think it only can go too far when it doesn't suit the work, when it becomes spectacle, and not like if I did that, no matter whatever I painted, it could be anything. They're not going to care about that painting anymore. They're only going to care about the material and conversation, because it could be a beautiful, like social, economically different painting that I've ever done or something like that. But they're still going to be like, so about that pee, like it's just going to
Yeah, exactly. And for the rest of your career. Yeah.
I think it's only, I think it only becomes a problem when it takes away from the work, and it doesn't add to the work. Like the ocean water, like even though people can have conversations around it, they're still looking at the work thinking like, oh, this is something else to look at. But yeah, once it becomes too much, like
What?
Only one piss Jesus per generation. What art moves you right now?
Oh, it's so much. It's so much. There's, because of social media, you see art, you can see so much art in like a day. And because I follow artists, I see art constantly. But I'm also looking at like, obviously, I feel like water is like really beautiful. And I'm like, our studio is like literally right next to the Hudson. So like I see water constantly, but I'm also like really interested in like still moments. I think of myself now as kind of like working in these ideas of minimalism. So like thinking about like some of the stuff that I'm working on now is like straight, just the abstraction of the material. So it's like just the water, just that surface, and then like sand. And it's all like one color. So that's like really what I'm interested in right now is like these ideas of minimalism, only because I'm thinking of how do you get to a point where you paint something just like one flat color and you're like, yeah, that's it. I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
Because to think of like, some of my favorite, thinking of Eve Klein painting like just blue. Like, oh, this is going to be the best blue I can possibly make, and it's blue. And then that's it. That's going to a museum. And you're like, and people are looking like, no, it's not. And it's in a museum now. So like to think to subtract everything or to get to something so simple that people can get in front of it and be like emotional. It's like something that I'm like really interested in, and like thinking about all these contexts and all this poetry that I put into my work. For people to like go up to a Rothko painting and then like cry, I was like, that is insane. But it's all about this idea of like, can you fit enough of nothing for people to be able to let their mind wander into the piece to get emotional for themselves? So like, that's what I'm really inspired by. It's like, if I can make somebody, even if they're looking at the features, it's like big enough that it fits their body. Like my favorite size is like 4 foot to like 6 foot, because it's like the size of a body. So like, I want you to stand in front of it and feel it like in the same way as your body's connection to it. So like thinking of you standing in front of this and then like creating some type of emotional connection enough that it makes you reflect on yourself and you like think of something deeper enough to the point where you like visibly cry. is insane. So like that's what I'm like really interested in.
Have you cried in front of a painting before?
Not at all.
Okay.
I don't cry much either though. I grew up in Milwaukee. There was a lot of gangs. You don't cry. What are you doing crying?
It's the blue.
I was gonna say I grew up with kind of cold, like with very like not strict parents, but my parents were not very emotional. So that's what I was gonna say. Like I just don't cry because of that. But
no, I don't cry because of that. I try now. I'm like, okay, I'm a grown man. If I feel like crying, all right, let it out. I still get in front of stuff, and I'm like, this is nice. so I'm trying to get there, but and I've definitely cried more in the last year and a half. But yeah, that is hard. Like to try to get emotional when you have been non-emotional for a very long time, especially as a man. It's like, it's like, all right, if a woman starts crying, you're the shoulder that they cry on. You don't cry too. You just hold your shoulder up, which I like tackling my work a lot, like thinking about that idea, because there's a lot of dudes that are like, I really want to cry, but I can't right now, and that's a problem. Yeah. I haven't gotten to the point where I was like, this piece is so beautiful, and start like weeping. I wish. I might also just not have enough personal trauma to be like, like I see my father's face in this painting. Like
it doesn't seem to faze you so much. You're just like carrying that. It's like it's fine.
Plus, I'm also like an artist, so now I'm looking like, how do you do that? Like, I don't think I ever get my mind to see it the same way.
Do you believe that you were born with a talent, or that you were painting because of just hard work?
Hard work and talent. I think my eyes are talented, but my hands I had to learn. So like I can see art and I think of it critically in a different way than maybe a lot of different people. So like those assets, and I have common sense, which I thought everybody had. And I'm starting to slowly learn that everybody does not have common sense. So common sense, born with common sense was like, oh, that's a talent now. So yeah, so like being able to just see something clearly, and to be able to like really think about it in a way where it's like formulaic and like be able to process something and then move on from it. Because I know a lot of people who are like super deep thinkers who get caught up on an idea and like can't break themselves free of that. Like I've never had a point where I was like, oh, I don't know what to paint. Like I always have multiple ideas. So that part I feel like was born talent. But like trying to get to where I'm at right now, oh yeah, that was hard work for sure. And it took me forever to get to that.
And you seem like you're not afraid to make a few experiments and mistakes along the way, which I think is really important if you want to have longevity, right?
Yeah. Well, also, being a cheerleader and being just a student athlete, like you got to take risks. Like I would, we did flips off of stuff, and I used to work for the NBA, so like. You're gonna get to a point where in a flip you're gonna get lost, and the thing about it is, do you know how to fall or not? And if you can fall well, then you can do anything, because if you can fall well, you don't hurt yourself up and you just get up and just do it again. So there's been multiple times where I've been in situations where I've tried something and I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go, but I know I can fall. And if I can fall without breaking anything, then you just do it again. I almost killed somebody a couple times, but that's okay.
Was that to do with the cheerleading or something else?
This interview, you have like some of the best lines that we've had in the podcast.
It's fucking wild.
It's like, wait a minute. Okay, so you worked for the NBA, so you worked for the Bucks?
Yeah.
I feel like we just glossed over the fact that you worked for the NBA. Because we moved into such different territory, we just accepted that as part of the story and just didn't even probe into it.
That's usually how my life is. I was a cheerleader for 3, and then I was a rim rocker, which is an acro dunker, the guys who jump on the trampolines and dunk. I was that for 3. So there was an overlap between 1 year. But yeah. So I was doing that. It was great.
And that's interesting because that's like you're putting on a show for people who sort of are not paying attention.
Yeah. Except for when they are paying attention. And that was probably the greatest moment I had in my life. It was the most intense thing I've ever done in my life. There was one day, the game was going great. We were losing, and then we started winning. And right then and there, people are like, "All right, do a commercial break, get the crowd all hype, and then we can get the team all hype." And so, literally, everybody's getting hype because the situation is turning in our favor. They're like, all right, get some people to go out there and do some flips or whatever, get the crowd pumped up, throw out T-shirts, blah, blah, blah. And then all of that happening, everybody goes out there doing flips, and then I'm supposed to be the last one because I'm supposed to be doing the biggest, grandest, most whatever thing. I go out, I do this flip, and then I started flipping stuff that I was like, I couldn't do this before because I was just so hyped. So I go out and I'm like twisting, and then I finish the flip and I look up into the crowd, and while I was flipping, I couldn't hear anything. So like it was quiet. And then after I landed, it was like, and then I freaked out, and then I like pounded it on my chest, and I was like, let's go. And then I walked off the court. I felt like I dunked and won the game. I was like, this is amazing, because it's a stadium full of people, and you feel like they're cheering for you, because I was the last person. I was like the last thing. So everybody's just watching me go across the court. And yeah, it's crazy. It was a wild moment.
I forgot people are actually paying attention when the team is starting to play well.
Oh, yeah. When the team is doing good. That crowd is something different. Like when I was on there when we had like Brandon Jennings and all these other like really great basketball players. So like when the team is doing great, the energy is amazing. However, when the team is doing poor, oh my God, it don't matter what I could do on that court, they would.
Yeah, exactly.
Just stare at me, eating their popcorn and upset at their cold chicken tenders. It was so mad.
You said it's all about learning how to fall the right way. Did you ever? Did you ever fall the wrong way?
Oh yeah. No. What? God no. Because if you fall the wrong way, you usually break something. But no, in the Bucks game, I felt like a couple times. But what I would do is that I had these slippery pants on, so like if I fall, it would usually be like a trip, and so I would slide backwards, and then I would roll to my back, and then just start flipping again. Because I was, I was like, it was like a trip, slide on the ground, roll up on my back, and then just start flipping again. And then I would just jump out. Yeah.
Look, for my own personal gratification, did Giannis ever high five you?
No, I got off the team right before he came. I know it was bad. It was awful. But also, they don't let you interact with the players if you work there.
Oh, is there like
so like if you, yeah. Like if you see some in the hallway, like, and I've stood next to people, like I've stood next to Kobe and LeBron on the court, because we used to do like performances while they did the national anthem, and so I was like, I got to be next to them, which is crazy, because when you see people on the court, they look tiny. When you're right next to them, you really understand what 6'5", 6'6", 7 foot look like compared to your body, and it is insane. But because they're huge. But you could be by the court, but it was one of those things where too many basketball players have gotten too close to dancers or people who worked at the stadiums, and they're like, nah, we can't have none of that. So when I got there, it was like, don't talk to them. They're in a whole different part of the building. Don't go over there. And if we see you over there.
Did you get like a nod from Kobe though? Like a little, just like.
Oh my! Oh yeah! I always got nods. Yeah, I definitely was nod king. I was the pointing king. It was nod boy. I know you see me. I see you.
I'd like to be able to draw some sort of metaphor between sports and art right now, but I got nothing.
That's the most,
I guess
it's the most in-depth sports chat I've had in my life.
I bet.
See, Doug always gets upset because I'm a huge basketball fan, so like this really excites me.
Which one's the cheerleader? Which one does?
They don't even have the cheerleading team anymore. It's so funny. It was there for like the time that I was there, and then when I became an acro dunker, it was like slowly fading out. So I was like, oh, glad I switched over.
You got some CV though. Acro dunker, warehouse guy, water enthusiast.
Oh my gosh. The acro dunking and working for the Bucks is the only thing that got me through the warehouse.
I was curious, like when you were working at the warehouse, like how many times you thought about painting. Like if it was just like, you're like, there's just nothing I want to be doing here.
Oh yeah, all the time. Literally, because the thing about it is I made maybe like 7-8 pieces through that 5-year span, whereas now I'm making like 7-8 pieces and maybe like a good weekend. So like I was working at that warehouse and I would want to work, like make art, but like also I didn't have the money for supplies, and then all of the stuff that I did have was like pencil and like maybe like a 16 by 20 notebook. So like I made pictures, but it was nowhere near what it could have been or what it is now, because I have a way better setup. And so like I made work. It was just rendering stuff, like me taking pictures of like Richard Pryor and like, oh, I can make that, or like pictures of my grandfather after he passed. I was like, yeah, I'll draw him. Or like Marilyn Monroe for some odd reason. I was like, yeah, I like this here. So I had no conceptual ideas to the work. I had nothing but me knowing that I could be at home making stuff. But the problem with warehouse jobs is you get off work and you are so tired and you know you have to do it tomorrow. So you're like, I'm going to eat. I'm going to watch something that I enjoy or do something I enjoy. So I would do the Bucks games and stuff. And then I would go to sleep and just get up and go back to work. It was insane.
You would drink a non-alcoholic beer.
Oh my gosh. I was not drinking at all. I hate drinking because I have such a high tolerance that it takes a lot of alcohol for me to get drunk. And that's the part about drinking, is you want to get to at least like, feel good. It takes forever to get to the feel good. So I was like, I'm not doing this unless it was like a fun party. If it's a party or something like that. Well, and in undergrad, we have great parties. Cheerleaders. If you ever party with anybody, cheerleaders are the best people to party with.
Really?
I'm gonna let you know that.
Why?
Oh my gosh! First of all, you got to realize cheerleaders are usually gorgeous people, the men and the women. They're all athletic, like crazy athletic, and they all, have a situation where they're supposed to be peppy. So like, them drunk is like, yeah. And they have the best games. They have the most. We had the best games, the amazing games. And it wasn't like every weekend or anything, but like, if we had a free time and there was, we just had like competition or something, boom, we're out there. We're having a good time. There's a lot of laugh. People would do drunk backflips, all types of stuff.
That sounds like the exact opposite of my drinking experience. My drinking experience is just me alone in a dark room, maybe a companion.
I came into this interview thinking we were going to talk about water, and I've learned so much more than I had no idea it was going to go in this direction. It's just, before we do go though, you've got a couple shows coming up. You got the one in Venice you mentioned, but then you've got Ross Sutton in New York, correct?
Yeah, I got one in Venice. I have another one that's happening in San Francisco. I'm supposed to be doing this.
Wait, where is San Francisco?
It's called Vox Gallery. Vox is VOX Gallery. Yeah, I'm doing that in May. And then some stuff in New York that's definitely happening, and then potential stuff overseas. I'm still waiting to see and get confirmed dates on stuff like that.
Which part of the overseas?
London and Switzerland.
Who you with in London?
Yeah, I gotta wait. Once I know, I can let y'all know. But those couple spots over there.
I scooped for it, but it didn't come back.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a fantastic time for you. Like this is like my favorite interview we've ever done. Like this is just so good.
Yeah.
No, it's just, there's so much here. No, and it's great.
Your energy is so good,
to
man.
catch you now as you're about to just like really take off even further. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You'll find all the details for Khari's forthcoming shows in the description of this episode. Again, thank you so much to Khari for bringing that cheerleader energy to this interview. We hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as we enjoyed making it. We'll be back with you all real soon. Till then, take care of yourselves and each other.